Hello, today I want to show you how to create a basic R1 schedule using VieSched++. So let's first have a look at the input files that we are using. So we are using the official VieSched catalogs, and in particular we are using the geodetic good source catalogs. Please always make sure that you do use the latest version of the VieSched catalogs. And yeah. So which observing modes are we using? Again, we are using an official VieSched observing mode. We are using the R1, R4 mode. And here you see the target SNR for X-band is set to 20 and for S-band it's set to 15. And that's correct for the R1 schedule. So let's have a look at the general setup. So we don't have to add everything by hand. We can also import the session from the schedule master. So let's open the schedule master, and we want to create a schedule for the R1 session in 2019. And let's simply pick the first one here, and I simply select this line, copy it and paste it into this input form and then parse it. And yes, so it has filled out the session code, it's filled out the start time and also the network and everything for you. So that's quite convenient. So for this R1 schedule, we want to use fill-in mode, and we also want to enable subnetting. So that's correct here. Let's have a look at the network. So there was the plan that 11 stations should participate in this R1 schedule. But if you look at the master, then you will see that 2 stations dropped out, namely Ago and Matera. That's why I deselect them now from the list. So now we end up with 9 stations for these sessions. Let's have a look at the source catalog or the source list that we are using. So as I said, I'm using the geodetic good source list. It contains 302 sources, as you can see here. And yeah, the scheduler is free to use any of these sources. So now let's come to the parameterization of the schedule. So VieVS is dividing its parameterization in 3 parts: the station-based parameters, the source-based parameters, and the baseline-based parameters. So let's start with the station-based parameters. So the parameterization can be a little bit tricky to understand at the beginning because VieSched++ is using a new approach for this. So therefore we have added a lot of help for you. So in general, everywhere in VieSched++ you have a built-in help. So if you enter the what's this button, the what's this mode by clicking this button or by hitting the F1 key, you can mouse over any element in VieSched++, and if you click on it, you get a detailed help about it, so that you understand what you are selecting and what you are setting and everything. Additionally, we are maintaining a FAQ list, so also here you find a lot of details in how things are affecting your schedule that you have used, and also here you have a big section about the parameterization, how it is working, and yeah, maybe it's best to read this through at the beginning. So let's go to the parameterization again. So let's start with the station-based parameters. So here you can see the default parameters which are set for every station. I want to change this or slightly adjust it a little bit. So here you see all available parameters that can be set, and I simply want to change the minimum scan time to 40 seconds for this experiment now. Let's do this, hit OK, now it's changed. Okay, additionally, I need to take care that there is an intensive session during the same time. So 2 stations, or let's first have a look at the intensive schedule master. So if I go back to the schedule master, I can have a look at the intensive sessions, and I see that there is one intensive at the same time, and it's with Cookie, Wetzel Nord, and Wetzel. So we have to tell the scheduler that during this intensive time it has to add some downtime for these 2 stations. So let's start by selecting Cookie, and now we need to tell the scheduler to add some more parameters, and this is, and here I simply say during this time the station is not available, and I give this a name. I call it intensive, and then I need to set the date during this parameters should be valid. So the intensive starts at 6:30. I will add a couple more extra minutes for the operators at the station to change the schedule. So let's add 50 more minutes, and then simply add the setup to your parameterization. Down here you get a visual representation of the parameters you have set, and if you now select cookie, then you can see that during this time period over here the parameters called intensive are valid, and they are listed on the left side. So during this time period the availability of the station is set to false. Let's do the same for VieSched. Also add these parameters, and we can also verify it by changing to VieSched. Okay, let's have a look at the source-based parameters. So for the sources, I don't have to do a lot. I just also want to have a look at the default parameters which I'm using. So here again, you can see all parameters which are available in VieSched++. And I want to change the minimum flux density of the source a little bit. I only want to observe sources which are brighter than 250 millijansky, so I change this to 0.25 jansky. And I also changed the minimum number of stations per scan to 3 for this experiment. Okay, the baseline based parameters are already correct. I don't need to change anything for this experiment here. Here you can see the weight factors they are using, and basically the weight factors determine which scan or which scan sequence is observed. So it determines which sources are observed at which time. So the weight factors are something very, very important, and usually you want to use good weight factors for your experiment. For this basic introduction, we leave everything to the default values, but yeah. Let's have a look at the output files that we are creating. So we are creating a VieSched file and a VieVS file, obviously. And additionally, we are creating also operation nodes and also an empty NGS files which can be used for simulations, for example, with VieVS. And here some more log files. You can add some nodes to your schedule here, which should be displayed in the files, or even add more contact information. Yeah, that's more up to you. So finally, we also want to add some more conditions to the schedule. So we want to say that and we want to add a condition which is valid for every source. So we select all here, and we want to say that the minimum number of scans per source should be 3, so that each source is at least observed 3 times. Okay, now let's start the scheduling and have a look at the output. So let's open the file. Okay, let's have a look. So it's already finished. So as you can see, you get a log file at the bottom here. Let's have a look at the log file. Okay, so here you get some basic information of the versions you are using. Then it's starting with the initialization. Here it's giving you some warnings that it has to change the 1 letter code for cookie and VieSched in order to avoid duplicates, so that's okay for us. So it was using this observing mode as intended, and yeah, here it's complaining that it does not find a horizon mask for Ishioka. Okay. Yeah, and then it starts with the scheduling, and it starts with creating the first schedule. It creates a schedule with 808 scans and 6,500 observations. And then it says that the source optimization condition is not met. So what this means is that that there are sources schedules which are not scheduled in 3 scans. So because we have said that every source should be at least observed 3 times. And yeah, here for the first iteration of the scheduling, it was not fulfilled for every source. So it's starting again, creating a new schedule with a reduced number of sources, and it's doing this 2 more times, and finally the third iteration, it's finally satisfied, so it has created a schedule with 814 scans and 6600 observations. Okay, here it's giving us some more warnings. So basically it's saying that there is a long idle time for cookie and VieSched, but that's due to our intensive session during this time period. So that's also correct. And then it still gives more information that it's creating some output files and everything. But the important part here is that we don't get any error messages, and the warnings we get, they are all not critical for our case. So let's have a look at the schedule. We can do this by using the VieSched++ session analyzer. So let's select the schedule, the VieSched file we have just created, and run the session analyzer. Okay. Here you get a graphical overview over your schedule. So this is the sky coverage of every station. And on the bottom here is very important. There are 2 sliders which basically define the time span that you're looking at the moment. So at the moment we are looking at the full time span from the start to the end of the schedule. But we can also change this to, let's say, 60 minutes. So now we are only looking in one particular hour in the schedule. And by moving the sliders a little bit, we can browse through our schedule and have a look at the sky distribution over the session. So let's have a look at everything. Let's see if the sky coverage is good enough for us. And yeah, so in this case, it's fine. Let's go back to the full time span. Yeah, you can also adjust the layout here a little bit. Let's only display 2 at the time. And if you, for example, look at Cookie and Ishioka, yeah, why not? You can add the legend to understand what the color means. So red, so basically the color code is the cable wrap information. So red is the counterclockwise cable wrap, blue is clockwise cable wrap, and green is neutral. And you also see the horizon mask of the individual stations here. Like for example, Cookie, it can't observe in this area here because there's another antenna occupying the view. Okay, on the right here, you get the list of all sources. You can also filter them and, for example, select or highlight individual sources, and then you see these highlighted sources are now displayed in yellow so that you can spot them easier. Okay, here you also get an overview of the session network and which antennas are observing together. Here you have the UV coverage of all sources. So in case you're interested in the UV coverage or in the for imaging, for example, you can see the UV coverage. You can change the bands and everything. Yeah. Here you see some more statistics. So like number of scans, number of observations, and here you have a visualization of how many stations are usually participating per scan. So we have a lot of scans with only 3, 4, and 5 stations, and only a few with 6, 7, and 8. Here is a histogram of the observing times per station, and yeah, again you can use the sliders to check if this is changing over time somewhat significantly, but yeah. Here are some more station-based statistics. So for every station, how many observations are there, how many scans and all that, how do this fit together. And on the bottom here, you see how the stations are usually spending their time. So on average, we have, on average, every station is observing for 70% of the whole session time. And the idle time is only 4.4%, which is quite good. It's quite little idle time and a lot of observing time, so we want that usually. And here we can also verify if the intensive period is scheduled correctly. So if we change the sliders down to 1 hour again, so that we only look at 1 hour, and we browse to the time span where the intensive starts, then you should see that cookie and VieCell are getting an increased idle time. So the idle time is displayed here in yellow. So let's change it, and then you see, okay, here the intensive starts, and during this period cookie and VieCell are idling all the time, so they are not scheduled in this schedule because they need to be available for the intensive. So this is correct in this case. And after the intensive stops, the idle time goes down again, and everything is basically the same for over the rest of the session. Okay. Additionally, you can here get even more information per source. For example, this is an overview which simply lists when is a source observed over the session and what is the elevation of the participating stations. So here you see the elevations for every station. For example, this is the elevation of cookie, and the black bars here are the observing times. So yeah. And finally, you also get information about the distribution of the baselines that you observed. So the stronger the color in this plot is, the more observations are between this baseline. So you can also filter it, of course. For example, if you're interested in what is Yaragati observing with, then simply filter it for Yaragati, and then you see here, okay, Yaragati is mainly observing together with Catherine, a little bit with Ishioka, and also a little bit with Hadrao, and almost never with the European stations. And for example, if you have a look at Cookie, then you see the Cookie is mainly observing with Japan, a little bit with Australia and Europe, and Cookie is never observing together with Hadrao. Okay, so if we are satisfied with our schedule and everything is as we want them, we can simply select or upload the SCHED and the operation notes files to the session master, or send it to the stations in order for them to observe the session as you would like them. Okay, so this was it. So I've showed you how to create a very basic R1 schedule. And yeah, thanks for watching.